What happened to you?" That was the first thing I said when I saw my daughter in line at the soup kitchen, holding my grandson like he was the only thing keeping her upright. I didn't ease into the moment. There wasn't time for small talk or a soft lead-in. That's not how grief punches you. It lands hard, straight to the gut. My name is Margaret Hall. I'm 65. I'm a widow. I was a mother long before that. And up until that Tuesday in July, I believed I had done right by my daughter. But that morning changed everything. For the past 4 years, I'd volunteered at a community soup kitchen in downtown Baltimore. Every Tuesday, I brewed coffee, set out donated bread, handed out food trays, and tried to offer a little dignity with every hello. After my husband Frank passed, I needed somewhere to be that wasn't silent, somewhere that reminded me life still went on. That Tuesday morning was hot, so hot the air shimmered above the sidewalk. People were more irritable than usual. I was standing near the counter, placing fresh bananas into a bin, when I noticed her. From the back, first thin shoulders hunched beneath a worn gray sweatshirt, jeans patched at both knees, hair pulled into a messy bun. She stood stiffly, holding the hand of a small boy who leaned against her hip. There was something familiar in the way she tilted her head toward him. I stepped closer, and then I saw it, those eyes. My grandson's eyes. My daughter, Rachel. The world tilted. She turned as if sensing my presence, and our eyes locked. In that instant, the shame on her face cut deeper than any words ever could. She gave me a broken, fragile smile. "Mama," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice barely above a breath. Rachel looked down at Lucas, who clung to her jeans like a lifeline. "We just needed lunch," she said. "Daniel's between jobs. Money's tight." Daniel. The man who once told me I was too old to understand how modern business works. The man who'd looked me in the eye and promised to take care of Rachel and their son. I never trusted his polished charm. But I held my tongue. Rachel said she loved him. "Where's your car?" I asked, swallowing hard. "He needed it," she mumbled. "We took the bus." The bus. In 90-degree heat. With a child. I glanced down at Lucas. He looked small. His shirt was clean but too short, his hair shaggy, his sneakers cracked, and his eyes, those big brown eyes, were too watchful for a child. "Have you two eaten today?" I asked. Rachel flinched. "We're fine." Lucas tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, I'm hungry." That did it. "Come with me," I said, reaching out. "You're not staying in this line." She hesitated. "Daniel's going to call soon. If I don't answer, let him," I said. "You're coming with me." To my surprise, she followed. We walked quickly to my car, parked 2 blocks away. The moment we got in and the air conditioner kicked on, Lucas fell into the back seat with a granola bar from my glove box like it was a feast. But we didn't have 2 minutes before Rachel's phone lit up. "Daniel." She didn't answer. She just stared at it. The call ended. It rang again. Still, she didn't answer. The third time, she picked up, hands shaking. "I'm with my mother," she said softly. I couldn't hear his voice, but I could hear the volume rage pouring from that phone like static. "I'm sorry," Rachel whispered. "I'll explain when I—" He hung up. 2 minutes later, a black sedan skidded into the parking lot. "Daniel." He flung open the car door and stalked toward us like a man unhinged. "There you are," he barked. "I've been calling for 20 damn minutes. You think this is a joke, Rachel?" Lucas shrank in the back seat, eyes wide. "Daniel, lower your voice," I started. He wheeled on me. "Don't you start. This is your fault. You raised a selfish, ungrateful brat who doesn't know her place." Rachel's face went white. "You're out here, parading your failures in public? Holding up a line like a beggar?" He turned to her, voice dripping venom. "What are you teaching our son? That handouts are acceptable? That being pitiful is admirable?" "Daniel, enough," I said, stepping between them. "You're scaring your son." "My son?" he spat. "She can't even answer a phone. And you look at you, smug, judging, always interfering. You think being some volunteer makes you noble?" I reached for Rachel's hand. "You're coming home with me." Before I could move, he shoved her hard. Rachel stumbled backward into the passenger door, gasping. That was the moment I saw everything clearly. Not just the manipulation, not just the lies. Abuse. My daughter was being abused. "You touch her again and I swear to God." I stepped forward, trembling with fury. Daniel sneered. "Go ahead, call the cops. You think they care about some crazy old lady and her broke daughter?" He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, and threw it on the pavement at Rachel's feet like trash. "That's all you get this week," he snarled. "Make it last." Then he stormed off, slamming the car door behind him. We stood in stunned silence. Rachel bent slowly, picked up the bill, hands shaking. Her lip was split. Her son was still cowering in the back seat, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. I gathered myself, wrapped my arms around her, and held her tightly. When I pulled back, I looked her in the eye. "Tell me everything," I said. "Right now." And finally, she broke. Tears fell freely as she spoke. "We've been living in the car for 3 months. Daniel said I ruined us, that I spent too much, that I drove us into debt. He showed me foreclosure notices, bank statements, said I needed help." She sobbed. I believed him. "Rachel," I said softly, "do you have access to your accounts?" "No," she whispered. "He says I can't be trusted, that I'm sick, gaslighting, financial abuse, and now physical." I drew a long breath and steadied my voice. "Rachel, listen to me. I think Daniel forged those papers. I think he sold your house and stole your money. And I know this isn't your fault." She looked at me, broken and raw, but in her eyes just barely I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. "What do I do?" she asked. "You trust me," I said, "because we're going to stop him, and we're going to get your life back. If this story moved you, tap like and comment where you're watching from. You might find someone watching right near you." I drove them to a small, family-run motel on the edge of town, nothing fancy, but clean, quiet, and safe. Rachel sat silently beside me, staring out the window with vacant eyes, while Lucas dozed off in the back seat, clutching the granola bar wrapper like it was a security blanket. I kept glancing at her hands. They trembled when she tried to tuck her hair behind her ear. Once we checked in, I helped them into the room. Lucas crawled onto the bed and fell asleep within seconds, shoes still on. Rachel stood by the window, arms crossed over her chest like she was bracing for a blow. "Do you want a shower? Eat something?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "I just want to know what to do now." I sat on the edge of the bed, took out my phone, and opened my old FBI contact list. "This is what we're going to do," I said. "But I need you to trust me completely." Rachel turned, her face wary. "Why would he do all of this, Mama? If he hated me so much, why not just leave?" I looked her in the eyes. "Because men like Daniel don't just leave, they destroy. They take control until there's nothing left of you, and then they blame you for it." I dialed the first number. "Marcus, it's Margaret Hall." There was a pause on the line, then a warm chuckle. "Well, I'll be. Retired life not treating you well?" "I've got a personal case," I said. "My daughter, her husband, identity theft, financial fraud. I need your help." His tone shifted immediately. "You have anything yet?" "Not on paper, but what I've seen today is enough to make my stomach turn. Start pulling what you can. I'll notify the white-collar crime team, quietly." I hung up and turned back to Rachel. "Where's your purse? Do you have anything with your financial information in it?" She dug into the duffel bag they'd been living out of and handed me a small, worn wallet. Inside were 3 things: a driver's license, a school ID badge, and a folded receipt for $18.45 from a gas station. No credit cards, no bank cards. "Daniel said I wasn't allowed to carry anything with me," she said. "He said I'd lose it." My hands clenched. I opened my laptop, accessed a few internal public databases, and ran her name through a basic credit trace. The initial results nearly made me sick. 23 open credit accounts, 4 personal loans, 2 auto loans, all in her name. "Rachel," I said slowly, "did you open any new accounts in the last 2 years?" She shook her head. "No, I didn't need to. My school issued me a card for supplies. I used that." I turned the screen so she could see. Her hand flew to her mouth. "What is this? Is this real?" "Yes, and this is only the surface." I printed the list and highlighted the creditors. "These are accounts opened under your Social Security number. This one here, a loan for $12,000, was opened 2 months ago and marked as defaulted. That's probably why your credit tanked. But I didn't do any of this." "I know." I dialed my second call to the Baltimore County Recorder of Deeds. "Hello, this is Margaret Hall. I need to verify the recent sale of a property former owner Rachel Hall Sutton." It didn't take long to confirm what I already suspected. "Sold April 12th, the clerk said. "Buyer, DK Investments, LLC, recorded for $215,000. I jotted it down. I knew that name. DK Investments had come up once during a pension fraud case 5 years ago. Suspicious, shell companies, no paper trail, always run by someone else's name. "Rachel, did Daniel ever mention DK Investments?" She frowned. "He said he had a cousin named Kevin doing real estate, that maybe we'd rent from him if things got bad." "Kevin, do you know where Daniel's staying?" She looked down. "He said I wasn't allowed to know. That I might show up and cause problems." I stood and began pacing. I needed more. If Daniel had access to her accounts, he was either using forged documents or had coerced her into signing over rights. "Did you ever sign anything under pressure?" I asked. "Yes, I signed something in March. He said it was a refinancing document." I was crying. He said we'd lose the house if I didn't sign it that day. My chest tightened. "Did you read it?" She shook her head. "He said there was no time. Typical. Manipulate, isolate, corner, and then force action. It was time to escalate." "Marcus," I said when I called him again, "this goes deeper than I thought. Shell companies, likely wire fraud, credit manipulation. I need a forensic sweep. I'll have someone start tonight." The next morning, I made a third call, this time to the payroll department at Riverside Elementary. "Yes, I'm calling on behalf of Rachel Hall Sutton. I have power of attorney, and I need to verify the status of her pension." There was a pause. Then the woman replied. Her account was closed in March. Full withdrawal, $42,000. I stared at the wall. All of it. Gone. I wrote down everything. I knew what the pattern looked like. Full asset control, social isolation, financial erasure, and now, physical abuse. I took Rachel's hand. "He's been building a case against you, making you look unfit, dangerous. So if you ever tried to leave, you'd have nothing." Her shoulders shook. "He said if I told anyone, they'd take Lucas. They won't. Not if we act now." Later that day, I made my fourth call to a private investigator I trusted named Tom Langford. Quiet, effective, ex-military. I told him I wanted photos, video, surveillance on Daniel and Kevin, and I wanted them yesterday. Tom didn't disappoint. By evening, I had pictures of Daniel and Kevin at a sleek apartment complex on the other side of town. 2 luxury vehicles in the lot. A poker table delivered 3 days prior. Rachel stood behind me as I flipped through the images. Her eyes widened. "That's our old sofa," she whispered. "That's our coffee table. He moved it all there?" "Yes," I said. "He's not just hiding, he's living off your money." That night, Lucas slept soundly for the first time in months. I sat beside Rachel on the motel's worn couch. She wrapped herself in a blanket, eyes red but open. "Mama," she whispered, "what if we can't win? What if the courts believe him?" I turned to her, took her hand gently, and said, "Rachel, for the first time in months, you're not alone. And I've spent 25 years learning how to take people like Daniel down. He doesn't know who he's dealing with." She gave me a weak smile. "You're scary when you talk like that." "Good," I said, "because tomorrow we fight back." The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The motel curtains let in a thin gray light, just enough to make out the shape of Rachel sleeping on the pull-out bed, her arm wrapped protectively around Lucas. He stirred, murmured something about dinosaurs, then settled again. It was a small, quiet moment, but to me, it felt like everything. We had a war to fight, but I wasn't about to let her march into it hungry. I walked down to the front desk, grabbed 2 cups of black coffee, and asked the clerk to recommend a local breakfast place with decent takeout. 15 minutes later, I returned with a bag of pancakes, eggs, and bacon from a place called Hank's. The smell was enough to wake Rachel. She sat up slowly, blinking against the morning light. Her eyes were swollen, but her voice was stronger than it had been in days. "I haven't had bacon in 3 months, she said, her smile small but real. "Then eat every bite," I told her. "We've got a long day ahead." After breakfast, I made another call to Marcus. "Morning," I said. "What do you have?" "You were right," he said without hesitation. DK Investments is a shell, registered under a burner address. No physical office, no employees. Who's the listed manager? Daniel's brother, Kevin. Of course. We're also seeing signs of laundering, he continued. Cash deposits just under the reporting threshold, moving through 3 different banks. Several of the accounts are in Rachel's name. Any surveillance yet? Our guy was at the apartment last night. They hosted a poker game. 20+ people, thousands in cash exchanging hands. I clenched my jaw. Can you send me the footage? You'll have it in an hour. I hung up and turned to Rachel, who was helping Lucas with his shoes. We have them, but it's not enough. If we want to take this to court, we need your voice, your statement. She stiffened slightly. I'm not sure I can. You can, I said gently. Not for me, for Lucas. You tell your story, and we'll back it up with every shred of evidence. She nodded slowly. I'll try. While she got ready, I started documenting everything. I opened a new file on my laptop and began logging dates. The sale of the house, the closure of her pension, the credit card openings, the threats, and the abuse. I scanned the photos Tom had sent from the night before. There was Daniel, laughing with a whiskey glass in hand, stacks of cash beside him. Kevin, arms crossed, overseeing the room like some second-rate casino boss. And behind them, unmistakably, was the couch from Rachel's old living room. Later that morning, I drove us to a lawyer's office I'd worked with in the past. Andrea Laskin, family law specialist, tough as nails. She met us in her corner office, which smelled faintly of lemon and leather, and listened without interruption as Rachel spoke. She hesitated at first, but once she started, the words tumbled out in waves. The lies, the manipulation, the threats, and finally, the violence. Andrea took notes quietly. When Rachel finished, the room was silent. You'll get custody, Andrea said firmly. Full. And once we present this, we'll push for criminal charges. Fraud, abuse, identity theft. Rachel looked up. You think the judge will believe me? Believe you? Andrea leaned forward. We'll bury him in evidence. From there, the day blurred into motion. We visited the school district's human resources office and confirmed the pension withdrawal had been initiated through an online portal one Rachel had never accessed. We filed for a full fraud investigation. I contacted the 3 major credit bureaus and began the dispute process for every single fraudulent account in her name. I helped her write out a sworn affidavit of identity theft. By the afternoon, we were sitting in the small motel room again. Lucas was curled up with his stuffed animal, a worn, plush dragon Rachel had managed to keep through everything. She sat next to me with a cup of tea, staring at the growing stack of paperwork on the table. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. You don't need to, I replied. I'm your mother. She looked at me with something I hadn't seen in weeks, hope, however fragile. I spent so long thinking this was my fault, she whispered, that maybe I was careless, that I had ruined everything. I shook my head. That's what abusers do. They make you question your own reality. But now you know. You're not broken. You were manipulated. She nodded. And now I'm angry. Good, I said. Hold on to that. It'll get you through what's coming. That evening, Marcus called again. We've got a problem and a break. One of the accounts Daniel used to funnel money just got flagged by Homeland. It's linked to a laundering ring under federal watch. My breath caught. Meaning what? Meaning this is bigger than just Daniel and Kevin. They've been moving money for other people, possibly criminal networks. The weight of it settled in my chest. How fast can you move? Give me 48 hours. I'll bring the FBI in officially. You just keep her safe. After I hung up, I turned to Rachel. It's bigger than we thought. Are we in danger? Not yet, but things are going to move fast. That night, she stood in the doorway of the motel room while I smoked a cigarette outside something I hadn't done in years. I can't sleep, she said. You will, I replied. Eventually. But tonight, sit with me. So she did. Under the motel's flickering porch light, she rested her head on my shoulder, and we sat there in silence. The storm was coming, but we weren't afraid of it anymore. By the 3rd day at the motel, Rachel had stopped jumping every time her phone buzzed, but she still flinched when a car slowed outside the window. Trauma doesn't leave when danger leaves. It lingers, waits, whispers. I'd seen it before in courtrooms and hospital hallways, but seeing it settle into my daughter's bones was something else entirely. Lucas was on the floor coloring dinosaurs when I made the call that would officially turn this from a family crisis into a federal case. I stepped into the bathroom, closed the door softly, and dialed Marcus again. "Okay," he said the moment he picked up. "We're greenlighting this." I exhaled slowly. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means we've confirmed laundering activity tied to DK Investments, high-stakes illegal gambling, wire fraud, identity theft. Your daughter's name is all over the paper trail, but in a way that clearly points to forgery." I leaned against the sink, gripping the counter. "How exposed is Rachel right now?" "On paper," he said carefully. "Too exposed for comfort. That's why we need her statement sooner rather than later. The longer this sits, the more risk there is that someone tries to paint her as complicit." I closed my eyes. That was my greatest fear, the thing Daniel had threatened her with repeatedly. "What about the abuse?" I asked. "The shove, the verbal threats, the control. That strengthens her position," Marcus said, "especially combined with the financial coercion. It paints a pattern. Judges understand patterns." When I hung up, I stood there a moment longer, staring at my reflection. I looked older than I felt. Tired. But behind the fatigue, there was something sharper now. Focus. When I stepped back into the room, Rachel looked up immediately. "It's time, isn't it?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, but we'll do this one step at a time." She glanced at Lucas, who was happily coloring a purple dinosaur with green spots. "I don't want him to hear everything." "I know," I said. "I've arranged for him to stay in the motel office for a bit. The manager's a grandmother." She already offered. Rachel smiled faintly. Of course she did. An hour later, Rachel sat across from 2 FBI agents in a quiet conference room at a downtown federal building. Marcus was there, along with a female agent named Allison Pricecom, middle-aged, the kind of woman who made you feel steady just by sitting near her. Rachel's hands shook at first. She twisted a tissue between her fingers, eyes fixed on the table. "Take your time," Allison said gently. "Start wherever feels right." Rachel took a breath, then another. "He told me I was bad with money," she began, "that I didn't understand numbers, that I was lucky he loved me enough to fix my mistakes." I watched her shoulders straighten slightly as she spoke. With every sentence, something shifted. She was no longer confessing, she was testifying. She told them about the refinancing papers, about the threats, about the isolation, about the night sleeping in the car while Daniel lived comfortably elsewhere, using her name like a credit card with no limit. When she reached the part about the shove in the parking lot, her voice broke, but she didn't stop. "And then he threw $20 at me," she said quietly. Like I was nothing. Allison slid a glass of water toward her. "You did the right thing coming forward." When it was over, Rachel looked exhausted but lighter, as if saying the truth out loud had loosened something tight around her chest. Outside the building, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. "I didn't think I could do that," she whispered. "You did," I said. "And you did it well." That afternoon, Marcus called with the update we'd been waiting for. "We have enough to move," he said. "Search warrants are being drafted. Surveillance is already in place." "How soon?" I asked. "Sooner than Daniel expects." That night, I barely slept. I lay awake listening to the hum of traffic and thinking about how close we'd come to losing everything. Not just the house, not just the money, Rachel herself. At dawn, my phone rang. "It's happening," Marcus said. "Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. I sat up straight. "Where?" "Your daughter's old house." I hung up and walked over to Rachel's bed. She was already awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. "They're going to arrest him," she said softly. It wasn't a question. "Yes," she swallowed. "What if he tries to blame me? What if he says I knew?" I sat beside her and took her hands. "Then we show them the truth. Every document, every recording, every lie." She nodded slowly. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," I said. "But fear doesn't mean we stop. It means we move carefully." The next morning, I watched Lucas eat his cereal and talk excitedly about dinosaurs like nothing in the world was wrong. Children are resilient that way. They live in the present because they have to. Rachel hugged him tightly before leaving him with the motel manager again. "Mama's going to be back soon," she said, forcing a smile. "I'll draw you a new dinosaur," he replied. At 6:14 a.m., Marcus sent me a single text message. They're in custody. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. 10 minutes later, photos arrived. Daniel and Kevin, handcuffed, being led out of the house Rachel once painted with love. Police lights reflecting off the windows. Evidence boxes stacked on the lawn. The poker table was still set up in what used to be Lucas's bedroom. I handed the phone to Rachel. She stared at the screen, silent for a long time. Then she exhaled, deep and shaking. "It's over," she whispered. "No," I corrected gently. "It's just beginning, but now you're safe." That afternoon, when Lucas came back to the room, Rachel knelt down and hugged him tightly. "Mama," he said, confused. "Are we okay?" She looked at me, then back at him. "Yes, baby," she said, voice steady at last. "We are." The sirens were gone by the time the sun fully cleared the rooftops, but their echo stayed with us all day. Rachel didn't cry when she saw the photos again. She studied them quietly, like someone afraid that if she blinked, the truth might dissolve. Daniel's face was pinched with anger, not remorse. Kevin looked stunned, mouth half open, as if he still believed someone would step in and explain this was all a misunderstanding. It wasn't. By mid-morning, the calls started coming in. First, it was Andrea, the family law attorney. "They're being held without bail pending arraignment," she said. "Given the federal charges, the judge isn't playing games." Rachel closed her eyes and let out a long breath. I could see the tension leave her shoulders just a little. Next came the call from Riverside Elementary. "Mrs. Hall?" the principal said carefully. "We heard something might be going on. We just wanted Rachel to know her position is secure. When she's ready, her classroom will be waiting." Rachel covered her mouth with her hand. Tears finally spilled over, but this time they were different. Not panic, relief. "I thought they all believed him," she whispered after I hung up. "That's what he wanted you to think," I replied. "Isolation is his strongest weapon, and it's gone now." Lucas came back from the motel office bouncing with energy, waving a drawing. "Grandma, look, this one breathes fire." Rachel knelt and pulled him into her arms. He laughed, loud and carefree, and for the first time since I'd found them in that soup kitchen line, I saw my daughter smile without forcing it. But safety didn't mean peace, not yet. That afternoon, Marcus called again. "They seized everything," he said. "Cash, documents, laptops, phones. We're talking 6 figures in unreported income. And Margaret, it's worse than we thought." My stomach tightened. "How so?" "There are at least 3 other women tied to similar accounts. Different names, same pattern. Daniel and Kevin were running a long con." I glanced at Rachel, who was helping Lucas build a tower out of paper cups. "Are they safe?" "So far, yes. We're reaching out quietly. Your daughter coming forward likely stopped this from getting much bigger." I hung up and sat heavily in the chair. Rachel looked up. "There are others." "Yes," I said honestly. "But you were brave enough to speak first." That night, after Lucas fell asleep, Rachel and I sat on the motel bed, the TV playing softly with the sound turned down. "I keep thinking about the parking lot," she said suddenly. "The way he looked at me, like I was nothing." I reached for her hand. "Abuse doesn't always start with fists. It starts with erasing your sense of self. He'd been doing that for years." She nodded slowly. "I believed him. That's what hurts the most." "Believing someone you love isn't a failure," I said. "It's human." The next morning, we returned to the old house for the first time since the arrest. Rachel hesitated at the curb, gripping the steering wheel. "I don't know if I can go in." "I'll be right beside you," I said. The front door hung slightly ajar, a thin strip of yellow police tape fluttering in the breeze. Inside, the house smelled wrong, stale smoke, spilled liquor, and something sour underneath. The living room furniture was shoved aside to make space for folding chairs and card tables. Beer bottles littered the counter where Rachel once helped Lucas with homework. Then we reached the hallway. Lucas's room. The poker table still sat in the center, green felt stained, chips scattered. His dinosaur posters were torn down, tossed into a corner. I saw Rachel's breath hitch. She pressed a hand to her mouth. They played cards, where my son slept. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. "It's over," I whispered. "They can't touch this space again." An agent handed us a box. "Personal items," he said kindly. "We found these in the back bedroom." Inside were photo albums, Rachel's old journals, Lucas's baby blanket. She clutched the blanket to her chest and sobbed. Later that day, Marcus met us outside. "You'll have full access once the court clears it. For now, the house is frozen as evidence, but it will be returned." "When?" Rachel asked. "Soon," he said, "and restitution is already in motion." On the drive back to the motel, Rachel was quiet. "Mama," she said after a while, "what if he tries to contact me?" "He won't," I replied. "And if he does, we document everything." She nodded. "I'm tired." "I know." That night, I dreamed of the soup kitchen again, the line, the heat, Rachel's bowed head. But this time, she looked up. The next morning, Andrea called with the timeline. "Arraignment in 2 days. I'll be there with you. You won't face this alone." Rachel took a deep breath. "I want to speak," she said. "I don't want to hide anymore." I smiled at her. That's how healing starts. Lucas ran in, holding his dinosaur. "Grandma, can we go home soon?" Rachel knelt in front of him, brushed his hair back. "Yes, baby. Soon." He grinned. "Good. I want my blue room back." So did we all. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not just in temperature, but in atmosphere, a heavy, clinical kind of cold, where lives are weighed against law, and no one breathes unless a judge gives permission. It wasn't my first time in a federal courtroom, but this time, I wasn't here as a witness or a forensic expert. This time, I was a mother. Rachel sat beside me on the front bench, her posture stiff, eyes focused straight ahead. She wore a navy blue blouse I'd bought her the day before, simple, clean, understated. She looked like the woman I remembered from 2 years ago, before Daniel began eroding her from the inside out. But when I looked closely, I could still see the hairline fractures he'd left. Lucas wasn't with us. He was back at the motel with Andrea's assistant, eating pancakes and watching cartoons. We didn't want him anywhere near this part of the process. "Do you want to speak?" I whispered. Rachel nodded. "Yes, but I'll wait until I see his face." The bailiff called the case. People versus Daniel Park and Kevin Park. The courtroom doors opened, and in they came. Daniel in handcuffs, orange jumpsuit, jaw clenched with that same smug arrogance he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. Kevin followed, eyes darting everywhere but toward us. For a second, I thought Daniel might smirk. But then he saw Rachel, and he froze. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She sat taller, spine straight, chin lifted. There was no hate in her eyes, only clarity. When the charges were read aloud, 42 counts of identity theft, 23 counts of credit fraud, multiple counts of money laundering, pension fraud, wire fraud, and child endangerment, Daniel's face didn't move, not even a flicker. Kevin, though, shifted uncomfortably, jaw twitching. The judge asked if the defense wished to enter a plea. "Your Honor," their lawyer said, "we request a continuance to review evidence presented this morning." "Denied," the judge replied. "This court is satisfied with the urgency and scale of the charges. We proceed to arraignment." Then the judge turned to Rachel. "Miss Hall, do you wish to make a statement?" She stood. Her voice was steady. "My name is Rachel Hall. For 6 years, I believed I was a woman who couldn't be trusted with money. I believed I was careless, irresponsible, and unfit to care for my son. I believed that because my husband told me so, every day." A hush fell over the room. "He said he loved me, said he was helping me, and while I slept in a car with our child, he used my name to run an illegal business, drained my accounts, stole my pension, and erased my sense of self." She took a breath. "I am here today to say he does not get to define me anymore. I survived him, and I will rebuild everything he tried to destroy." The judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Miss Hall." Daniel looked away first. After court adjourned, Rachel walked out with Andrea at her side. I followed behind, watching her shoulders, how they no longer slumped, how she carried her body like someone reclaiming space. In the lobby, she stopped suddenly. "What is it?" I asked. "I didn't think it would feel this good," she said, "to finally say it all out loud." "It's the beginning," I replied. "You've taken your power back." That afternoon, we returned to the motel and found Lucas drawing another dinosaur, this time with a cape. "Grandma," he said proudly, "this one's a hero." "Yes," I said softly, wrapping my arm around Rachel. "Yes," He is. Rachel sat down beside Lucas, tousling his hair. You know, someday you'll have your own room again. With your dinosaur posters and your nightlight. He looked up. Really? Really? Later that night, Andrea came by with more news. The house is formally being returned to your name, she said. The sale's being voided due to fraud. Your credit reports are being corrected. And the court has ordered preliminary restitution, upfront release of $20,000 from seized assets to cover housing and essential expenses. Rachel blinked. That's fast. It helps when the evidence is overwhelming and the victims are cooperative, Andrea replied with a small smile. We celebrated that night with takeout Chinese food. Lucas fell asleep with a fortune cookie crumbled on his pillow. Rachel stayed up late, rereading the court documents 3 times. I still can't believe it, she said. This time last month, I thought I was crazy. You weren't crazy, I said. You were gaslit. She nodded. There are going to be more hard days, aren't there? Yes, I said honestly, but they'll be honest days. The next morning, Rachel woke up early and went for a walk. She came back with 2 cups of coffee and a small bouquet of flowers from a street vendor. I want the motel to feel less like a stopover and more like a home for now, she said. Small things. Real healing always starts with small things. Over breakfast, Rachel made a list. Tasks. Steps. Talk to payroll about restarting pension contributions. Finish dispute forms with credit agencies. Call Riverside to set return date. It wasn't just a list. It was a blueprint for a life beyond survival. That afternoon, we drove by the house again. The police tape was gone. The yard looked quiet. The roses Rachel had planted years ago had begun to bloom again, resilient, bright, and unapologetically alive. Lucas pointed from the back seat. That's our house? Rachel smiled, her voice thick. Yes, baby, it is. And for the first time in a long while, that sentence felt true. The key felt heavier than I remembered, not in weight, but in memory. Rachel held it in her palm, rubbing her thumb over the brass edge like she was waiting for it to dissolve. We stood on the porch of her house, and the quiet of the neighborhood wrapped around us like a held breath. A single crow called from the oak tree in the front yard. Someone was mowing a lawn down the block. It could have been any Saturday morning in suburbia. Except it wasn't. It was the day my daughter reclaimed her life. Lucas stood between us, clutching a stuffed dinosaur and shifting from foot to foot with impatient excitement. Mama, open it! Rachel didn't move. It doesn't feel real. I put my hand on her shoulder. It is. You fought for this. She looked at me with glassy eyes, then slid the key into the lock. The door clicked open. For a second, none of us moved. And then Lucas darted inside with a whoop of joy. His laughter echoed through the hallway. Rachel stepped over the threshold slowly, like the floor might collapse. I followed. The house still smelled faintly of cheap cologne and cigarette smoke, the remnants of Daniel and Kevin's poker nights. The furniture was gone, most of it confiscated. The walls had scuffs and dents. The carpets needed replacing. But it was standing, and it was hers again. Lucas sprinted down the hallway and into his bedroom. "Mama, they took my blue rug!" he yelled. Rachel chuckled. "We'll get a new one," she called back. We stood in the living room, sunlight streaming through the window and falling in soft gold slants across the floor. "I don't know where to start," she whispered. "With what matters," I said. "We'll clean, we'll paint, but first you sit, just for a minute. You earned that." She didn't sit. She walked, room to room, touching door frames, brushing her fingers along the walls. In the kitchen, she ran her hand over the counter like she was checking if it was really solid. Her face shifted through a dozen emotions: relief, grief, anger, disbelief. Finally, she ended up in the backyard. The rose bushes had somehow survived the neglect. A few blossoms drooped, but others bloomed defiantly red, fragrant, a small miracle. Rachel knelt beside them and touched one bloom like it was a sacred object. "I planted these the spring after Lucas was born," she said. "Daniel said flowers were a waste of money. I told him I didn't care. You've always been stronger than you think," I told her. She glanced at me. "Then why did I let it get so far?" "Because he didn't break you all at once. He chipped away slowly. That's how abuse works. You survived, and that's enough." We spent the rest of the day cleaning. Rachel opened every window to air the place out. I scrubbed the kitchen while she vacuumed. Lucas played in the empty dining room with his dinosaur toys, making roars and explosions. We were a team, just like we used to be before life unraveled. In the afternoon, a delivery truck arrived. Andrea had sent it 2 twin beds, a donated kitchen table, and a new mattress for Rachel. "Consider it a restart kit," her note said. Rachel opened the box with the sheets and pressed them to her face. "I never thought I'd cry over pillowcases," she said, laughing through tears. By early evening, the house looked less like a crime scene and more like a home in transition. Rachel stood in the center of the living room and exhaled. "It's going to take time." "Yes," I said, "but you've already started." Lucas ran up with his toy badge. "I'm the police now," he shouted. "I keep the bad guys out." Rachel scooped him up and spun him around. "Best security system ever." We had pizza on the floor that night, sitting on a blanket like a picnic. Lucas fell asleep, curled up with his dinosaur under a sheet of stars projected from his nightlight. Rachel and I sat on the back porch with cups of chamomile tea. "I forgot how quiet it is here," she said. "No traffic. No parking lot arguments," I replied. She winced. That day still plays in my head. The way he shouted, the way I believed it was my fault. It wasn't. And it never will be. She was quiet for a long time. "Do you think I'll ever trust again?" "You already are," I said, gesturing toward the house. "You trusted yourself. That's the hardest step." "I want to tell my story," she said finally. "Not now, but maybe someday. For the women who don't have someone like you, who are still stuck." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "When you're ready, your voice will matter." She looked up at the stars. "You know what I'm most scared of?" "What?" "That one day Lucas will ask me why I stayed so long." I thought for a moment. "You'll tell him the truth. That you believed love meant loyalty. That you were scared. That you didn't know you were being lied to. And then you'll tell him what matters more, how you got out." She nodded. We sat in silence, letting the crickets and distant hum of summer night fill the air. A wind moved through the roses. Lucas stirred in his sleep. And for the first time in a long time, Rachel didn't look afraid of tomorrow. The bell echoed down the hallway like an old friend returning after a long trip. Rachel stood just inside the front office of Riverside Elementary, fingers nervously smoothing the fabric of her blouse. She hadn't set foot in this building in nearly 10 months. It looked the same blue-tiled floors, corkboard walls covered with student art, the faint scent of crayons and cafeteria chicken nuggets, but everything inside her had changed. She clutched the manila folder under her arm like a shield. Inside it were copies of her court documents, credit dispute letters, and an official letter from the FBI confirming her as a victim in a federal fraud case, proof that she wasn't who Daniel had claimed she was. She wasn't unstable. She wasn't irresponsible. She was a survivor. The secretary looked up and blinked in recognition. "Rachel?" she said, voice soft with surprise. "Is that you?" Rachel smiled. "Hi, Nancy." Nancy stood quickly and came around the desk. "Oh, honey, we were so worried. The principal, Mrs. Green, she kept asking about you. We didn't know where you'd gone, and when you didn't answer your phone." "I know," Rachel said. "I was in a bad place, but I'm here now, and I'm hoping to come back." Nancy's eyes filled. "Let me go get her." A few minutes later, Mrs. Green emerged from her office, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that made students sit up straighter. Her expression softened the moment she saw Rachel. "Rachel," she said gently. "Come in." They sat in the office, sunlight streaming through the blinds. Rachel handed over the folder, her heart pounding in her chest. Mrs. Green read carefully, nodding. When she reached the final page, she closed the folder and looked up. "I had no idea." "I didn't either," Rachel said. "Not really, until it was too late." "You don't owe me an explanation," Mrs. Green said, pushing the folder aside. "You owe yourself grace. But I appreciate your courage in bringing this." Rachel exhaled, shoulders relaxing a fraction. "I want to come back," she said. "I need to. Not just for the income, but because teaching reminds me of who I am." Mrs. Green smiled. "Your students still talk about you. One of them brought me a card last week they'd made in 2nd grade. Miss Hall taught me how to spell Tyrannosaurus Rex, it said. He's in 5th grade now." That made Rachel laugh. "I'd be honored to have you back, Mrs. Green said. "We'll start with half-days. Ease you back in." Rachel swallowed the lump in her throat. Thank you. As they walked through the halls together, teachers peeked out of classrooms and smiled. A few hugged her. No one asked questions. They didn't need to. Their warmth said enough. Rachel stood outside her old classroom door, staring at the nameplate. Miss Hall. Room 204. She touched it lightly with her fingertips. Later that afternoon, back at the house, I was painting Lucas's room a fresh blue. He'd chosen the color himself from the paint store, pointing with sticky fingers and declaring, Dino Blue. He was in the backyard with Rachel, helping water the rose bushes. I could hear his giggles through the open window. The doorbell rang. It was Andrea. She stepped inside with a brown envelope. I thought I'd deliver this one in person, she said. You'll want to read it. Rachel came in, wiping her hands on a towel. What is it? Andrea handed it to her. Rachel opened the envelope and pulled out a letter from the Department of Education. It's confirmation, Andrea said. Your pension has been reinstated in full. The funds are in a protected account now. No one touches them but you. Rachel's eyes brimmed. I thought it would take months. It would have, Andrea said, if your mother wasn't the kind of woman who collects favors like medals. I smirked. Guilty. Rachel hugged the envelope to her chest. I never thought I'd get any of this back. You didn't just get it back, Andrea said. You earned it. That night, we had our first proper dinner at the house, a roast chicken, mashed potatoes, corn on the cob. Rachel had made Lucas a special He clapped when it wiggled. I like it here, he said, mouthful. I'm glad the bad guys are gone. Rachel reached across the table and took my hand. Me too, baby. Me too. After dinner, Lucas fell asleep in his new bed under a ceiling of glow-in-the-dark stars. Rachel and I sat on the porch again, this time with glasses of iced tea and quiet contentment between us. I feel like I'm walking back into my life, she said. One step at a time. You are, I said. And this time you're in control. She looked at me. I used to think strength meant not asking for help. I nodded. A lot of us do. But I was never alone, was I? No, I said. Not for a second. She leaned back in her chair, the porch creaking softly beneath us. Somewhere down the street, wind chimes rang in the warm night air. And just like that, I knew we had turned a corner. 3 weeks into Rachel's return to work, things had started to settle into a rhythm again. It wasn't the same rhythm as before. This one was quieter, more cautious, stitched together with small victories and the echoes of things lost. But it was a rhythm nonetheless. Every morning, Rachel packed Lucas's lunch with loving precision apple slices, arranged into smiley faces, little sticky notes with cartoon hearts and words like, "Be brave today." She still flinched slightly when her phone rang, and sometimes, in the stillness of night, I'd catch her sitting at the kitchen table staring at nothing. But her eyes had changed. The emptiness was gone, replaced by something slower, steadier. Hope. That morning, the mail arrived late. I was in the front yard watering the hydrangeas when the postwoman handed me the small bundle of envelopes. Looks like the usual bills, flyers, and one official-looking one, she said. I sorted through them, pausing when I reached the letter addressed to Rachel in crisp block letters with no return address. The paper was thick, too formal for junk mail. I frowned, turning it over in my hand. Back inside, I set the mail on the counter. Rachel was in the kitchen, reheating coffee. "This came for you," I said, handing her the letter. She studied the envelope and hesitated, suddenly still. "What is it?" I asked. "I recognize the handwriting," she whispered. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Lucas was playing in the living room, lining up his dinosaur toys in an elaborate circle. He looked up briefly, then went back to his game. Rachel pulled out a single sheet of paper and unfolded it. Her breath caught. "Daniel," she said. I stepped closer. "What?" She handed me the letter. I read, "Rachel, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I had to write. I've had a lot of time to think in here. I made mistakes. I see that now. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. For everything. You were never the problem. I was. I don't expect forgiveness. But if there's any way for you to tell Lucas I love him, I'd be grateful. Daniel." I felt my stomach turn. Rachel stared out the window, her jaw clenched. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I don't know. I thought hearing that would mean something, that maybe it would matter. And does it?" She folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. No, not really. She walked over to the trash can, opened it, and dropped the letter in without another word. That night, after Lucas was asleep, Rachel and I sat on the porch. The air was thick with late summer heat and the soft hum of cicadas. "I didn't cry," she said after a long silence. "I thought I might, but I didn't." "You've already done all the crying," I said. "Maybe," she replied. "Or maybe I'm finally out of tears for him." We sat quietly for a while. "You know," she continued, "it's strange. When someone breaks you down for so long, you start to feel like the only way to survive is to be small, quiet, invisible. And now I feel like I'm taking up space again." "You're allowed to," I said. "You deserve to." She looked over at me, her eyes soft. "It's funny. I used to think you were too hard on people, too strict. But now I get it. That fierceness, it's protection, it's love in armor. I never wanted you to need that armor," I said. "I know. But I'm grateful I had it when I did." The next morning, Rachel walked Lucas to school. It was the first time in over a year that she'd done it. He held her hand all the way, telling her stories about his imaginary dinosaur world and how one of his toys had fallen in love with another and they were getting married. She laughed, really laughed, her head tilted back in the sunlight. As they reached the school gate, Lucas stopped and looked up at her. "Mama," he said, "are the bad guys really gone now?" Rachel crouched down to his level, smoothing his hair. "Yes, baby," she said. "They're gone, and they're never coming back." He nodded solemnly. "Good. I didn't like them." Then he kissed her cheek and ran toward his classroom, his backpack bouncing with each step. Rachel stood there for a moment, watching him go. I waited by the car, giving her space. When she finally joined me, she was quiet, but there was something calm in her silence, like a lake that had finally settled after a storm. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. I'm finally starting to be." That evening, she started cleaning out the last box Daniel had left behind in the garage. Inside were old papers, a broken watch, and a small leather-bound journal. Rachel opened it and scanned the first few pages. It was Daniel's handwriting, dense and chaotic. She frowned. "Looks like notes, business plans, contacts." I leaned over. That could be useful. We spent an hour cataloging every name and number. It didn't change anything, but it gave Rachel something important: control over the wreckage. She was reclaiming her narrative, piece by piece. Later that night, she placed the journal on a shelf in the hallway closet, not as a keepsake, but as evidence, a reminder. Then she curled up on the couch next to Lucas, who was watching an old dinosaur cartoon, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she fell asleep there, safe, warm, and home. The storm rolled in just after midnight. One of those late summer tempests that rattled the window panes and lit up the sky in ghostly flashes. I was up in the attic organizing the last of my storage boxes when the power flickered once, then held. From below, I heard Lucas stir in his room. He never liked thunder. I descended the stairs and found Rachel already there, standing outside Lucas's bedroom with a mug of chamomile tea in hand. "He called out a few minutes ago," she whispered. "Said there were shadows on his wall. I think it's just the storm." I nodded. "Want me to stay with him for a bit?" "I already did," she said with a tired smile. "But he might need both of us tonight." We sat on the edge of his bed, one of us on each side, stroking his hair until his breath slowed into the steady rhythm of sleep. His little hand stayed wrapped around Rachel's thumb the entire time. Even in dreams, he held on tight. Later, after she tucked the covers snug around him and kissed his forehead, we went downstairs. The house felt cozier now, less like a place where trauma had once lived and more like a home again. But when I went to the laundry room to toss in a load, I noticed something, a faint smell, like mold, or something older. "Rachel," I called, "have you been down in the basement recently?" She joined me in the hallway. "Not since we moved back in. I haven't had the nerve." We both stared at the narrow door that led to the basement, Daniel's old domain. He kept most of his records down there. Or so he said. I remember he'd insisted on installing a second lock on the inside for safety. At the time, it felt unnecessary. Now, it felt suspicious. I pulled the string light and led the way down the creaky steps. The air was damp, heavy. As soon as we reached the bottom, I saw what had caused the smell, a pile of soggy cardboard boxes near the far wall. The recent rain must have leaked through the foundation crack I'd warned them about years ago. Ugh, Rachel muttered, pulling her sweater sleeve over her nose. I'll clear it out, I said. But let's look through them first, just in case. Most of it was junk old clothes, broken electronics, manuals for outdated appliances. But near the bottom of one box, I found a plastic binder. It was labeled in thick marker, DK Clients 2022. Rachel's face blanched. That's Daniel's handwriting, she said. We brought the binder upstairs and sat at the dining table, flipping through its contents. Inside were names, phone numbers, and more alarmingly copies of signed contracts and scanned IDs. It didn't take long to realize what it was. A client ledger for Daniel's illegal poker operation. But it was more than that. Look at this, I said, pointing to a name. Margaret Donnelly. That's a widow I met last year during a financial crimes seminar. She reported being scammed by an investment group called DK Holdings. Rachel leaned over the page. And here this guy's a retired school janitor. Look at the amounts. They weren't just running poker games. They were laundering money through fake investments. And they'd been using people's retirement savings to do it. How much of this did he keep from me? Rachel whispered. All of it, I said grimly. But this changes the scope. It's not just fraud against you anymore. This is a pattern. A bigger operation. I took photos of every page and emailed them to Marcus at the FBI. Then, just to be sure, I locked the binder in my bedroom safe. Rachel stared at the closed door for a long time. I keep thinking I've found the bottom of what he did, she said softly, and then I find more. That's what predators like Daniel count on, I replied. Exhaustion, confusion, making you so tired you stop digging. But I'm not stopping, she said. I looked at her, this woman who had once stood in a soup kitchen line looking hollow and afraid, now staring into the abyss of her past with fire in her eyes. No, I said. You're not. The next day, Marcus called back. I showed the documents to our lead investigator, he said. It confirms what we suspected. Daniel and Kevin were part of a larger fraud ring. We've opened a new case. It might take months, but we'll bring them all down. Every last one. What about the victims? I asked. The retirees? The teachers? We'll do everything we can to contact them, he said. Rachel's documents are going to be crucial, and her testimony could help build a class action case. When I told Rachel, she nodded slowly. I'll do it, she said. Whatever they need. I want those people to get justice, like I did. That weekend, Rachel wrote a statement 3 pages long, single-spaced. It wasn't just about Daniel. It was about every lie, every manipulation, every moment she doubted herself because of someone else's deceit. When she finished, she handed it to me without ceremony. I'm not afraid of him anymore, she said. You never had to be, I replied. You were always stronger than he wanted you to believe. We sat in the backyard as Lucas played with his dinosaurs in the sandbox. The rose bushes swayed in the breeze. Life, honest, hard-won life, was blooming again. Rachel picked up a yellow rose that had fallen and twirled it between her fingers. You think I'll ever feel completely safe? She asked. I don't know, I said truthfully, but I think one day you'll stop needing to ask that question. She nodded, and for the first time, she smiled without hesitation. It had been almost 2 months since Rachel moved back in, and the house was finally beginning to feel like it belonged to her again. Every corner bore the scent of renewal. Fresh paint in the hallway, new linens on Lucas's bed, a family photo on the mantel that didn't include Daniel. Lucas had started drawing again. His pictures, once shadowed with confusion, dark scribbles, and monsters lurking under stick-figure beds, now brimmed with superheroes, sunshine, and smiling dinosaurs. Rachel pinned them to the fridge like badges of survival. But peace is a fragile thing. It was a Saturday morning. Rachel was upstairs folding laundry. Lucas was building a Lego spaceship on the living room floor, and I was in the kitchen flipping pancakes when the doorbell rang. I opened the front door and found an older man in a worn gray windbreaker standing on the porch. He looked startled to see me. I'm looking for Rachel, he said. She's not available, I replied evenly. May I ask who you are? He hesitated. Name's Craig. I knew Daniel. We worked together back in the day. My stomach tightened. What's this about? He shifted on his feet. Look, I just need to talk to her. It's about something Daniel left behind. I wouldn't come here if it wasn't important. Before I could respond, Rachel appeared behind me. Her voice was sharp. "Craig." He turned. "Hey! Hey, Rachel." She stepped onto the porch, blocking the door behind her. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said. "But I didn't have a choice. The others, well, they're asking questions. About the money, about the records." Kevin's gone silent, and everyone's spooked. Rachel's jaw clenched. "I have nothing to do with that. I was never part of your operation." "I know," Craig said quickly. "I know. But Daniel used your name on a lot of stuff. I just thought you should know. Some of them think you were in on it." I took a step forward. "Is that a threat?" No, he said, backing up. "It's a warning. I didn't come to cause trouble. I came to say you should be careful, because there's still a lot of money missing, and people don't like loose ends." Rachel crossed her arms. "You should leave." He looked at her, something like guilt flickering in his eyes. "You were the only decent one. I'm sorry, truly." Then he turned and walked down the steps, disappearing into a beat-up sedan parked across the street. We locked the door and checked the windows. That night, Rachel didn't sleep. I could hear her pacing upstairs, then finally coming down into the kitchen in the early hours of the morning. "I thought it was over," she said quietly, pouring herself a glass of water. "I thought with Daniel in prison, everything else would go with him." "Sometimes the rot runs deeper than the tree," I said. "But that doesn't mean it can't be cut out." She looked at me. "What if they come after me? What if they try to pin everything on me?" "They won't," I said. "You have the FBI. You have documentation. And you have me." She nodded slowly. "I'm tired, Mom. So tired." "I know, baby." She returned to bed, but neither of us slept much that night. The next morning, I called Marcus. "Someone came to the house," I said. "Name's Craig," said he knew Daniel. "Warned Rachel that others in the ring think she was involved." "I'll run his name," Marcus replied. "You have anything solid? A license plate?" I gave him the details, I remembered, and he promised to send someone by the house. 2 days later, Marcus called back. "Craig Walker, small-time hustler. Part of the poker ring, but not a major player. He's telling the truth about others getting nervous. There's a rumor going around that Daniel stashed cash before his arrest." Rachel and I exchanged a look. "The basement binder," she said. "There were gaps, holes in the ledger. Entire months missing." "You think he was hiding more?" I asked. She nodded. "And they think I know where it is." That evening, we went back down to the basement. This time, we pulled every panel, moved every box, checked every crack in the foundation. And we found it. Behind a loose board in the stairwell, tucked into a sealed plastic container, was a manila envelope packed with receipts, bank slips, and at the very bottom a ledger with coded notations. We brought it upstairs. Marcus came that night. When he saw the documents, he whistled low. This is big. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, fake charities. Daniel wasn't just running poker games, he was laundering money for someone else." "For who?" Rachel asked. "We don't know yet," he admitted, "but now we might be able to find out." He packed up the files and left with a promise. "We'll keep you safe." That night, Rachel didn't say much. She stood at the kitchen sink, staring out into the dark backyard. "What are you thinking?" I finally asked. "I keep wondering how long he planned this," she whispered. "Was it always about the money? Was I ever anything more than a useful name on paper?" I moved beside her and put my arm around her shoulder. "He married you because you were kind," I said. "Because you were stable. Because you were good. And men like Daniel always look for people like that to exploit." She nodded. "But he didn't win." "No," I agreed. "He didn't." Lucas padded in from the hallway, his stuffed dinosaur under one arm. "Mama, I had a bad dream." Rachel bent down and scooped him up. "It's okay, baby, I've got you." As they disappeared up the stairs, I stayed in the kitchen, watching the rain start to fall again, the kind that washes everything clean. The next morning brought more than just sunshine. It brought media. A local news van parked across the street from our house just after 8 o'clock. The reporter, a sharp-featured young woman with too much energy for a Sunday, was already filming a segment with the house in the background by the time Rachel peeked through the curtain. "They're here because of Daniel, aren't they?" she asked, her voice low and tight. "They must have gotten wind of the new investigation," I said. "The FBI might have leaked it intentionally." Sometimes they do that to rattle the bushes. Rachel wrapped her arms around herself. I don't want Lucas seeing any of this. He won't, I assured her. He's in the den watching cartoons. I'll take care of it. I stepped outside and walked across the lawn with purpose. The cameraman lowered his equipment as I approached. Can I help you? I asked the reporter. She smiled too brightly. We're with Channel 7. We're covering the story on Daniel Park. There are rumors that the FBI is now investigating a wider fraud network tied to his illegal gambling operation. We've heard this is the primary residence of his ex-wife. I'd like you to leave, I said plainly. There's a child inside this house and a woman trying to rebuild her life. The reporter hesitated. Off the record, ma'am, are you related to Rachel Park? I'm her mother, I said. And if you want to be the kind of journalist who does more than feed on trauma, you'll turn that camera off and go chase real corruption, not the survivors of it. She blinked. Her smile faded. Then she nodded, just slightly. Understood, she said. We'll go. I waited until the van pulled away before going back inside. Rachel was sitting at the table, arms wrapped around her mug of tea. Thanks, Mom, she murmured. I'm so tired of people staring at me like I'm part of his mess. You're not, I said, but it'll take time for the world to catch up to what we already know. Just as I sat down, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and froze. It's Kevin, she whispered. He's trying to call me from prison. Don't answer, I said instinctively. But she already had. Rachel? His voice crackled through the speaker. Listen, I don't have much time. I'm only allowed one call a week. What do you want? She said, her tone flat. I know you talked to the FBI again. I know they came by about the offshore stuff. She looked up at me. I nodded, keep him talking. They're going to try to pin it all on me and Daniel, Kevin continued. But there are others involved, Rachel. Bigger players. People who won't want their names showing up in court records. I don't care, she said. You ruined our lives. Kevin's voice grew sharp. No, Daniel ruined your life. I just helped him cover it up. There's a difference. You think that makes it better? No, he said, but it might make it useful. There was a pause. Then, if I give you names, can you get me a deal? She nearly dropped the phone. A deal? You want me to help you? I'm facing 20 years. I'm not going down alone. Tell the FBI I want to talk. I want protection. And in exchange, I'll give them everything. Names, accounts. Where the rest of the money's hidden. She stared into space for a moment, then said quietly, write it all down. Every word. I'll pass it along. She hung up before he could answer. I reached across the table and took her hand. Are you okay? I'm fine, she said, but her hand trembled in mine. That afternoon, I drove to the FBI field office and handed Marcus a detailed summary of the call. He read it twice, then said, if Kevin's serious, this could blow the lid off something much bigger than we thought. How dangerous is it? I asked. Marcus looked grim. Potentially? Very. Some of these offshore entities are fronts for organized financial crime. Money laundering, yes, but also fraud, blackmail, trafficking. Then you'll protect her? With everything we've got, he said. Rachel is the reason we're this far. We won't let her become a casualty. By the time I got home, Rachel had gone into overdrive. She was printing bank statements, digging up old emails, calling credit bureaus. Every part of her that had been passive, afraid, withdrawn, was now on fire. I don't want to just survive anymore, she told me as she stapled documents together. I want to understand exactly how he did it, every detail, every lie. I'm proud of you, I said. But you don't have to carry all of this alone. She paused, then smiled faintly. I know, but I have to do something. For Lucas, for the women who can't fight back. Later that evening, Rachel tucked Lucas into bed and came down with a box of old family photos. Mom, she said, can we talk about before Daniel? I asked. She nodded. I used to be someone else, she whispered. Do you remember that version of me? I do, I said, my voice cracking. I remember the girl who danced barefoot in the rain, the one who wanted to be a principal one day, the one who used to make pancakes in the shape of letters to help Lucas spell. She smiled, tears in her eyes. I want her back. You're already becoming her again, I said. Every day you choose to keep going is a step toward her. She picked up a photo. It was one of her holding newborn Lucas. Eyes bright, tired but joyful. I thought I'd lost her forever. No, I said. She was buried, but not broken. We sat in silence, the photo resting between us. Then Rachel looked at me. Do you think we'll ever be free of all this? I thought of the binder, the offshore accounts, Kevin's warning, the news crews, the threats still unseen. I don't know, I said honestly, but we'll face whatever comes, together. The clock ticked on. The night deepened, and the shadows outside pressed close. But inside, the light still held. The following week passed in a blur of federal paperwork, security protocols, and guarded conversations. Rachel's phone was now monitored by the FBI, her email routed through encrypted systems. Marcus had assigned a protective detail 2 plainclothes agents who rotated shifts parked in a gray sedan across the street. Rachel moved with quiet urgency now. No longer just a mother or a survivor, but a witness in a potential federal case that could ripple far beyond Baltimore. But safety doesn't always come from outside threats. Sometimes the danger grows right under your own roof. It started with Lucas. Subtle changes, at first. He grew clingy again, following Rachel from room to room. He wouldn't eat much and flinched when someone raised their voice, even on TV. I caught him one afternoon in the hallway, pressing his ear to the door of Rachel's room. When I asked what he was doing, he looked at me and whispered, "Is Mommy in trouble again?" That night, I sat Rachel down. "He's picking up on your stress," I said gently. Rachel let out a long, shaking breath. I know. I try to stay calm around him, but it's like I'm living in a glass house. One wrong move and it all shatters. "Maybe it's time you talk to someone," I suggested. "A real therapist. You don't have to carry this weight alone." She hesitated. "It's hard to admit I need help. I used to think needing help made me weak." "It doesn't," I said. "It makes you human." The next morning, Rachel made a call. She scheduled a session with a trauma counselor. Just saying it out loud, the word trauma seemed to unlock something in her. That evening, she told Lucas in the softest voice, "Mommy is going to talk to someone who helps people feel better when bad things happen." Lucas looked up from his drawing. "Like a doctor for your feelings?" "Exactly." He nodded thoughtfully. "I think I need one too. Sometimes I still see Daddy in my dreams." Rachel's face crumpled, but she held herself steady. "Then we'll go together." They started therapy the following Thursday. A quiet little office on the north side of town, with wind chimes on the porch, and a therapy dog named Muffin, who sat by Lucas during sessions. Meanwhile, Kevin's information had opened a floodgate. Marcus called one night just before dinner. I put him on speaker. "You need to hear this," he said. "Kevin gave us access to a cloud storage account Daniel used under a fake name. Dozens of spreadsheets, wire transfers, shell corporations based out of the Cayman Islands and Macau. Anything tied to Rachel?" I asked. "Yes and no," Marcus said. "There's more money than we imagined. But the good news? Kevin's statements match the files almost exactly. It proves Rachel's ignorance. She was used meticulously, but she wasn't complicit." Rachel leaned back in her chair, exhaling like someone surfacing from deep underwater. "There's something else," Marcus added. "Kevin mentioned a woman, Daniel's girlfriend." Rachel stiffened. "The one from the country club?" "Yes, but she wasn't just his side piece. She was laundering funds, too, and she's still out there." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What's her name?" "Goes by Elise Navarro. Real name might be different. We're still tracking her." "Let me see her face," Rachel said, her voice firm. Later that night, Marcus sent a photo. Rachel stared at it for a long time. "She came to my school once," she whispered. "Pretended to be a parent looking for third-grade enrollment. I remember her perfume. Expensive, overpowering. She watched me more than she listened." "She might have been scouting," I said, "making sure Daniel's stories about you held up." Rachel dropped her phone onto the couch and stood up. "I'm so tired of being hunted. I want to be the one doing the hunting for once." "You already are," I said, "by telling the truth, by surviving." But I understood her frustration. For every step forward, it seemed a shadow emerged from behind. A few nights later, that shadow took physical form. It was after midnight. The house was silent. I was in bed when a motion sensor went off on the porch camera. My phone buzzed, and I opened the security feed. A woman, blonde, slim, dressed in all black, Her face turned away from the camera. She crept up the steps, tried the front door. Locked. She pulled something from her coat, possibly a key, and tried it. It didn't work. She stood there for a moment, then bent and placed something on the welcome mat before disappearing into the dark. I rushed down the hall to Rachel's room. She was already awake, holding Lucas in one arm, phone in the other. "You saw it too?" she asked. "Yes." We waited until sunrise. When the agents across the street changed shifts, we brought them the envelope. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Some were old Rachel pushing a stroller, Rachel at the grocery store. But some were new. From this week, Rachel picking Lucas up from therapy, Rachel sipping coffee in our kitchen, and one of me, taken from behind while I stood on the porch. The agents took the envelope and promised immediate action. Later that day, we packed a few bags. Marcus had already offered placement in a witness protection safe house until things calmed down. Rachel had resisted. Now she agreed. Not because of herself, but because of Lucas. The safe house wasn't what I expected. It was a charming 2-story brick home nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac in a Virginia suburb, fully furnished, discreetly monitored. An agent lived 2 doors down, posing as a retiree named Jim. Rachel set up Lucas's coloring books on the kitchen island. "This place doesn't feel like home," she said quietly. "It's not," I replied. "It's a pause, not an ending." She gave a weary smile. "You always know what to say." Not always. But when I looked at her stronger, scarred, but still standing, I remembered why I'd never given up. That night, Rachel stood in the backyard, under the stars, and whispered, "I want to testify." I turned. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "If Elise Navarro is watching, then let her see me rise." We met with the FBI on a foggy Tuesday morning, escorted through the quiet halls of a federal building that smelled like old coffee and copier paper. The interview room wasn't what you'd see on television, no mirrored walls or single swinging bulb. Just a simple table, 3 chairs, a pitcher of water, and a voice recorder blinking red. Rachel wore a gray sweater. One Lucas had drawn little hearts on the sleeve of with fabric markers. She didn't try to hide it. If she was going to testify, she'd do it as herself a mother, a woman who'd survived, not a polished prop for someone else's narrative. Marcus nodded at her as she sat down. "You ready?" She looked at me first. I gave her a small nod. Then she looked back at Marcus and said, "Yes." The first hour of questioning was focused on the past, her marriage, the finances, the subtle ways Daniel had chipped away at her independence. The time he canceled her credit card and told her it was for her own good. The vacations he booked in her name with miles she never earned, the accounts she never opened, the bills she never saw. Then came the details about Elise Navarro. "I saw her once," Rachel said. "She came to my school pretending to be a parent, but she wasn't interested in enrollment. She was watching me, like she was confirming something." Marcus leaned forward. "You think Daniel sent her?" Rachel hesitated. "No, I think she sent herself. She was smarter than him, slicker. Daniel was always chaos. Elise was strategy." That afternoon, we returned to the safe house, Rachel exhausted but lighter. Her words were on record now. Her story no longer just something whispered in the dark. Lucas greeted her at the door, holding up a drawing. "It's you, Mommy," he said, "fighting the bad guys with a shield." She blinked rapidly and scooped him up. "That's exactly what I'm doing." Later that evening, we received a call from Marcus. "Elise Navarro is gone," he said. "Disappeared. Her apartment in D.C. was cleared out. She left behind a wig and a burner phone. We found evidence she boarded a private charter 2 days ago." Rachel's face tightened. "Where to?" "Switzerland, we think. But she's not the main concern anymore." "What do you mean?" Marcus was silent for a moment. Then, the files Kevin handed over contained a name we didn't expect. A senator's aide, Michael Rayburn. He signed off on several shell donations that funded Daniel and Elise's gambling startup. I felt my stomach turn. "Are we talking political corruption?" "Not just corruption," Marcus said. "If this goes public, it'll shake people in places they thought were untouchable." Rachel leaned against the counter, rubbing her temples. "So I'm not just a witness anymore. I'm part of a chain reaction." "Yes," Marcus said, "but your testimony is critical. It proves how real people are used, how these operations prey on the vulnerable. If we can show that make it human, we stand a chance of blowing this wide open. I'll do it, she said quietly. Just tell me when. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Rachel was prepped by federal attorneys. She practiced testimony with video playback. Lucas started sleeping through the night again. I baked more than I had in a decade, the smell of cinnamon and apples helping to make the temporary space feel like a real home. One night, over dinner, Rachel looked up and said, "Do you think people will believe me?" "Yes," I said. "But I stayed," she whispered. "All those years, I let him lie. I let him make me believe I was the one destroying our family." "That doesn't make you weak," I replied. "It makes you human. It makes you someone who wanted to believe in love, even when love was a weapon." She wiped at her eyes. "I hate that he still lives in my head." "He won't forever," I said. "You've already started pushing him out. Every time you speak the truth, he loses power." 2 weeks later, Rachel was called to testify in a closed-door federal hearing. It wasn't glamorous. There were no TV cameras, no reporters, just her, a panel of attorneys, a stenographer, and the quiet gravity of justice in motion. She spoke for nearly 4 hours. Afterward, the lead attorney stood and shook her hand. "You did something brave today," he said. "I just told the truth," she replied. "That's the bravest thing most people never do." We left the building in silence, the autumn wind brushing golden leaves across the sidewalk. Rachel took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "I thought I'd feel different," she said, "like I'd won something." "You have," I told her. "You won yourself back." That night, as we sat by the fireplace, Lucas fast asleep upstairs, Rachel asked, "What happens now?" "We wait," I said, "and we heal." The next morning brought news. Kevin had accepted a plea deal in exchange for testifying against higher targets. Daniel, despite his incarceration, was facing new charges tied to the broader conspiracy. And Elise Navarro, she had vanished without a trace. But not forever. "I have a feeling," Rachel said, staring out the window. "She'll come back." "If she does," I said, "she'll find a different woman waiting." The phone rang at 4:17 a.m. I was already awake. Years in the bureau had trained me to wake at the first vibration of dread. I reached for the receiver before the second ring. "This is Pat." "It's Marcus. Sorry to wake you." Rachel stirred in the other room. I could hear the mattress creak. Lucas was still asleep, curled up beneath a blanket covered in rocket ships and stars. "What is it?" I asked, already bracing. "Elise Navarro just entered the U.S." I sat up straighter. "She came back?" "Flew in under a false name through a private airport in New Jersey. Facial recognition flagged her. We got the alert an hour ago." "Why now?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Marcus said. "She used a diplomat's channel to bypass most screening. We think she has something, or wants something, but it's deliberate." I turned to glance at the door Rachel had just opened, her eyes searching mine from across the hallway. "She knows Rachel testified," I said. "Probably," Marcus replied. "We're putting eyes on her. But there's more." Her re-entry coincided with a wire transfer from a dormant account tied to Kevin. It was flagged by Interpol, $1 million, moved into a shell company in Maryland. My blood ran cold. They're funding something, or buying silence. Rachel came into the living room and sat beside me. Her face was pale, but calm. She could hear everything. "Does Elise know where we are?" she asked softly. "No," Marcus answered through the phone. "Your location is sealed, encrypted across multiple channels, and your security detail is being doubled starting today." Rachel nodded. "Then I want to see her." I blinked. "What?" "She came back for a reason," Rachel said. "I want to know what it is. And if she's ready to play games, I want her to know I'm not afraid anymore." The next 48 hours felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon of history. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every unknown number on our phones brought a flicker of fear. The agents assigned to the house rotated every 8 hours, all of them now armed and hyper-alert. On day 3, a call came from Elise's attorney. "She wants to meet," Marcus told us, privately. "She claims she has evidence to clear Rachel entirely and she'll hand it over, but only to her." My stomach twisted. "Absolutely not." Rachel didn't flinch. "Where?" "Public place," Marcus said. "Her condition." She said, and I quote, Tell the girl I want to see her eyes when I return what was stolen. Rachel leaned forward, fire returning to her voice. Then let's set it up, somewhere public, somewhere I'm not just protected but seen. The meeting was scheduled for noon the next day. Union Station, Washington, D.C. Hundreds of travelers, tourists, officers, cameras, and a cafe with tall windows and high visibility. Elise would come alone. Rachel would be escorted in but sit down alone. I'd be watching from the next table, pretending to read a paper. Rachel wore a navy blue coat. Not too formal, not too casual. She looked every inch like a woman reclaiming her narrative. Elise arrived 5 minutes late, gliding through the crowd like she owned the place. She wore red, of course. She did a long silk scarf knotted at her throat, oversized sunglasses, and that quiet, smug confidence I remembered from the surveillance photos. She sat down opposite Rachel, crossed one leg over the other, and smiled. "Well?" she said, removing her glasses. "You survived." Rachel's voice was steady. "More than that, I came back." Elise tilted her head. "You always had more backbone than he gave you credit for." "Daniel?" Rachel asked. Elise laughed. "Oh no, darling, I meant Kevin. Daniel was a puppet. Charming, yes. But Kevin? He's the one who built the bones of it all." "I want the evidence," Rachel said. "You said you had something." "I do." Elise opened her purse and slid over a flash drive in a silver case. "Emails, account numbers, voice memos, proof you never knew, and a ledger that shows the payments made to silence the people who did." Rachel touched the drive but didn't move it. "Why are you doing this?" Elise shrugged. "Because I'm tired. Because the people we worked for turned on me. Because I saw your testimony and realized I wasn't the only one who'd been used." "You were never used," Rachel said. "You chose this." Elise met her gaze, and for the first time, her smile faded. "Maybe I did. But I never expected to feel guilt. Yet here we are." "Is that what this is?" Rachel asked. "Guilt? No," Elise said, standing up. "It's survival. But I hope you do something with that drive. Tell your story. Burn them all down if you can." She walked away without looking back. Rachel didn't move for a full minute. Then she picked up the flash drive, slipped it into her coat pocket, and nodded at me. We left the station in silence. No one followed us. Back at the safe house, Marcus called within the hour. "That flash drive? It's gold. Names we didn't have, codes to offshore vaults, even a conversation between Kevin and a man linked to a sitting senator." Rachel stared at the drive on the counter. "You said you wanted to know why she came back," I told her. "She wanted to see my eyes," Rachel said softly, "to know if she still scared me." "And does she?" Rachel turned. "No, not anymore." That night, Lucas crawled into her lap with a book about galaxies. She read to him in a steady voice, one hand tracing the stars, the other resting gently on his back. He looked up midway and said, "You sound like you again." Rachel smiled. "That's because I am." The next morning brought rain soft, constant, and unrelenting. It misted against the kitchen windows as I made coffee, the kind of drizzle that makes everything feel heavier. Rachel sat at the table, the flash drive in front of her like a ticking clock. "Marcus called," I said. "They're prepping a federal indictment package." Elise's files filled in gaps we didn't even know were missing. Rachel didn't respond right away. She traced the rim of her mug with her finger. "They'll try to bury it. Some will. But we have the leverage now." She looked up at me. "Then let's use it." 2 hours later, we were at the federal building again. The agents were quieter this time, more reverent. Rachel wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a key that had unlocked something far bigger than anyone expected. Marcus met us in the briefing room, flanked by a new face, Special Counsel Heather Moreno, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like sandpaper. "Elise gave us the final piece," Moreno said, wasting no time. "We now have proof that campaign funds were funneled through Daniel's operations into offshore accounts. And more importantly, we have dates and digital fingerprints." Rachel sat up straighter. "Who's being named?" "A handful of low-level fundraisers, a former judge, and," she paused, "Senator Michael Rayburn." I exhaled. "He's been protected for years," I said. "Deep pockets, high places." Moreno nodded. "That ends now." Rachel's fingers gripped the arms of her chair. "What about Kevin?" "He's flipping," Marcus said, testifying in exchange for reduced time. He gave us more names, and enough detail to dismantle the entire laundering web. Rachel laughed short, bitter. So now he wants to be the hero. No, Moreno said calmly. He wants to save himself. You're the one pulling this whole thing down. That afternoon, Rachel was invited to speak off the record at a private roundtable of prosecutors and investigators. They wanted to hear the human side, not just numbers and wire transfers, but what it meant to live through the fallout. I sat outside the conference room, watching through the glass as she spoke. Her voice didn't waver. Not once. When she mentioned the night sleeping in the car with Lucas, there were tears in the room. When she described Elise at Union Station, a few agents exchanged sharp glances like they understood that the ghost had become real. As we drove home, Rachel turned to me and asked, "Why do people still think it can't happen to them?" "Because admitting it means accepting we're not immune," I said. "But you're showing them what survival really looks like." That evening, Rachel got a call. It was the principal from her old school. "Rachel," the voice said warmly, "we heard. Everything." We had no idea. "When you're ready, your classroom is waiting." Rachel blinked fast. "I don't know if I can go back yet." "You don't have to," the woman replied, "but the door's open, always." Rachel hung up and sat quietly on the couch, Lucas asleep beside her. "I want to teach again, but I don't want to teach like I used to." I tilted my head. "What do you mean?" "I want to teach kids that their worth isn't measured in silence, that their families don't get to define their truth. That speaking up isn't betrayal, it's bravery." That night, she wrote, for hours, at the dining table, by lamplight, pens scratching over page after page. Not a statement, not a report, but her story. The next morning, she handed it to me. "Will you read it?" I sat with my coffee and read every word. The pain, the confusion, the small victories that felt like mountains, the fear, the quiet courage that bloomed from despair. It was raw, it was true, and it was devastatingly beautiful. "Rachel," I said softly, "this is more than your story. It's a lifeline." She nodded. "I want to publish it. Maybe through one of those domestic abuse nonprofits, or a podcast, something that reaches women who don't even realize what they're in." I placed the manuscript on the table and covered her hand with mine. "Then let's find someone who can help us get it out there." The next week was filled with quiet preparations. The indictment became official. Senator Rayburn's name appeared in headlines, though buried behind neutral language and guarded commentary. But it was enough. The unraveling had begun. Kevin's trial date was set. Daniel, still behind bars, tried to call Rachel. She declined. "Elise?" I asked one morning. "Gone," Marcus said. "She vanished again. We won't find her unless she wants to be found." "Will she be charged?" "If she ever resurfaces, yes. But she's clever. She left just enough behind to earn leverage, maybe even redemption, in some twisted way." Rachel shrugged. "Let her run. She already lost the one thing she wanted most control." 2 nights later, Rachel read an excerpt from her story on a local women's radio show. Her voice wavered at first, but then it grew steady, fierce, full of fire. "When he told me I was broken," she read, "I believed him. When he told me I was dangerous with a debit card, I believed him. When he said I couldn't be trusted with my own son, I nearly shattered. But I survived. And I'm here to tell you, if you feel alone, if you feel crazy, if you've forgotten what it feels like to be believed, you are not alone." The station's phones lit up. 20 minutes of calls, tears, thanks, confessions. One woman said, "I think I'm living that story right now." Rachel looked at me afterward, tears in her eyes. "I think I'm starting to understand what healing really means." "You're not just healing," I told her. "You're becoming." The wind had shifted. You could feel it in the way people spoke to Rachel now, with respect, with curiosity, with something close to awe. But change, even when it's for the better, stirs the sediment at the bottom of your soul. The past doesn't fade quietly. It echoes. One morning, while Rachel was packing books for a charity drive at the community center, Lucas came up to her holding a framed photo. It was from the old house before everything. "Was Daddy always mean?" he asked. Rachel froze. The question wasn't bitter, just honest, the way only a child could ask. She knelt down. "No, baby, not always. There were times he made me laugh. He loved you. I think, in his own broken way, he really did. Lucas studied the picture. Then why did he hurt us? Rachel looked into his eyes and said, because sometimes love gets twisted when someone is hurting inside. But it's never your fault when someone treats you badly. Never. He nodded, thoughtful, then placed the photo back in the donation box without another word. That night, Rachel and I sat on the porch watching the neighborhood wind down. A dog barked in the distance. Sprinklers ticked across a nearby lawn. It was the kind of quiet that used to feel foreign. Now it felt like home. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, Rachel said. Like Daniel will send someone. Like Kevin will recant. Like Elise will return and laugh in my face. I reached for her hand. That's trauma talking, not truth. She nodded. I know, it just doesn't turn off. No, but it gets quieter, especially when you speak louder than it. The following week, Rachel received an official invitation to speak at a national conference on financial abuse and domestic coercion. The keynote panel, prime slot, expenses covered. Her hands trembled as she read the email. Do you think I should? I think you already have, I said. Now it's just a bigger room. She accepted, but not without fear. Not without nights where I found her sitting by the window, staring into the dark with that faraway look that said the past was still tapping on her shoulder. Then came the letter. It arrived by certified mail. No return address. Postmarked from Arizona. Rachel opened it in the kitchen, her hand steady, her face unreadable. It's from Elise. I tensed. What does it say? She's in hiding, but she heard the podcast. She says she cried. She handed me the letter. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, unmistakably Elise. Tell Rachel I finally understand what was stolen from her wasn't just money. It was her voice, her confidence, her right to be believed. I can't undo what I did, but I hope that when the world finally listens to her, it will drown out my silence. Rachel folded the letter neatly. Closure? I asked. No, but maybe a page turned. That night, she added a chapter to her manuscript, titled simply, The Women Who Left. It wasn't a defense of Elise. It wasn't forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement that even villains carry wounds, and sometimes the truest justice is to outlive them, unbroken. A few days later, Rachel stood on stage at the conference. The lights were bright, the audience packed. She told them about the lie that grew slowly, about the bills she didn't remember charging, about the gaslighting, the isolation, the endless self-doubt. She told them about waking up in the car with Lucas's breath on her shoulder and wondering how she'd gone from PTA meetings to public rest stops. She ended with this: there are women right now living that version of me, hiding it behind makeup or silence or fake smiles. If you're one of them, know this. The moment you speak, the moment you ask for help, the world starts to tilt back in your favor. There was silence. Then, a standing ovation. Rachel came off stage shaking, laughing through her tears. I didn't faint, she whispered. You soared, I said. Back home, life settled into a rhythm. Rachel started teaching again, part-time. Lucas made the soccer team. The garden bloomed again. Rachel had planted tomatoes, lavender, and sunflowers in the front bed. But healing isn't linear. One night, Lucas had a nightmare, screamed for Rachel. Don't let Daddy take me. She held him all night. And the next morning, she called a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. I thought I was doing okay, she told me later. But now I know okay isn't enough. We deserve more than survival. We deserve peace. Then came the final court date, the restitution payout. A judge, stern and methodical, read the list of recovered funds, frozen assets, and pending seizures. Over $300,000 returned, pensions restored, credit wiped clean. And Daniel? He looked hollow, older, smaller somehow in his orange jumpsuit. When asked if he had anything to say, he turned toward Rachel and said, I never thought you'd win. She didn't flinch. That's why I did. He was let out. Kevin followed, eyes downcast. Their stories finally over. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Microphones, flashbulbs. Rachel stepped to the podium. I'm not here to speak for every survivor, she said, just for one. For the mother who thought silence would protect her son. For the teacher who lost her job to lies. For the woman who believed love meant losing herself. I got my name back, my voice, my life, and I'll spend the rest of it helping others do the same. That night, back on the porch, Rachel said, "Do you think I'll ever feel like this didn't happen?" "No," I said honestly, "but I think one day you'll look back and realize it doesn't define you." She nodded. "Maybe. But tonight, I just want to sit here. With you. With peace." And we did. A year passed. Not the kind of year that rushes by in a blur of holidays and grocery lists, but one measured in small victories, in cautious laughter, in the delicate unfolding of trust. Rachel had changed. Not in the way trauma scars a person, but in how surviving it can sometimes give someone a new kind of armor. Softer in some ways, sharper in others. Her smile came easier now, but there was steel beneath it. A quiet understanding of what she'd endured and what she'd reclaimed. It was Lucas's 9th birthday. The backyard was filled with balloons, folding chairs, mismatched tablecloths, and the glorious chaos of children. Music played low from a Bluetooth speaker. Someone brought a watermelon salad. Someone else grilled hot dogs. And at the center of it all, Rachel stood beside the cake, beaming as Lucas blew out his candles. No one missed how his wish this year wasn't whispered like it used to be. He said it aloud. "I wish this feeling never ends." When the laughter settled and the kids tore off to chase each other, Rachel came to sit beside me under the oak tree. "It's strange," she said. "I used to think justice would feel heavier, more dramatic, like a scene in a courtroom or a headline on the news. And now, it feels like this." She gestured at the yard, the picnic tables, the sun casting gold over everything. "It feels like watching my son laugh without fear. Like sleeping through the night without checking the locks 3 times. I nodded. Justice isn't always a gavel. Sometimes it's a quiet Saturday in your own backyard. She smiled. The roses bloomed again. I looked toward the flower bed. The same bushes she planted before everything fell apart. Somehow, they'd survived the foreclosure, the emptiness, the neglect. This year, they bloomed brighter than ever, vivid, unapologetic red. "They always come back stronger," I said. "If the roots are deep enough." That evening, as twilight softened the edges of the day, Rachel gathered everyone on the porch, neighbors, friends, colleagues who had returned to her life. She held up a copy of her published book, small, paperback, unassuming on the outside. But within it lived her story, her fight, her fire. "I wrote this," she said, "for the women who think they're losing their minds, for the ones who believe they're to blame, for the mothers sleeping in their cars, for the teachers being told they can't be trusted with their own paychecks." There were tears, nods, silence that meant understanding. "Because someone fought for me," she continued, "and now I'll spend the rest of my life fighting for them." Afterward, I stood at the edge of the yard, watching the porch lights flicker on. I thought about that day at the soup kitchen, how Rachel had turned with hollow eyes, clutching Lucas's hand like it was the only thing anchoring her to the world. And now this. Music floated through the air. Someone laughed. Lucas sprinted past in a superhero cape, dragging 2 friends behind him. Rachel stood in the doorway, framed by the light, her arm around a man I'd come to know kind, quiet, respectful, a fellow teacher who loved her not in spite of her past, but because of it. She caught my eye, raised her glass. "To survival," I whispered, "and to the women who rise." Later, when the guests had gone and the stars had come out, Rachel and I sat on the steps, sharing the last slices of cake, barefoot, tired, full in every sense of the word. "Do you remember what I asked you in the car that day?" she said softly. "When I didn't know what was real anymore?" I nodded. "You asked me what to do next." She smiled. "You told me to trust you." "You did. And look what happened." "I didn't save you," I said gently. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you how." She reached out, squeezed my hand. "You know what I think the bravest part was?" I continued. "It wasn't giving the statement or pressing charges. It was waking up every day and choosing not to disappear, not to give in." Rachel leaned back, eyes closed, face tilted toward the sky. "There are women out there right now, still stuck where I was. I want them to know it's not too late. They're not broken. They're not crazy. They're not alone. You'll tell them, I said. You already are. She opened her eyes. You think people like Daniel ever understand what they did? Maybe, I said, but it doesn't matter. They don't get the last word. And with that, we sat in the hush of the night, stars blinking above us, the house glowing behind. The world didn't feel fixed. It never would be, but it felt bearable, honest, possible. Rachel was no longer someone to be rescued. She was a lighthouse standing tall, lighting the way for others still lost at sea. And I was simply her mother, who showed up, who stayed, who believed. The story wasn't over, but it was finally hers to tell. This story reminds us that abuse doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it hides in silence, in stolen paychecks, in gaslighted memories. But even in the darkest moments, truth can be reclaimed, dignity restored. Rachel's journey teaches us that survival is not weakness, it's strength in its rawest form. And that justice isn't just about punishment, it's about healing, about rebuilding, and about choosing to rise every single day. Most of all, it reminds us that no one should have to fight alone, and sometimes just one person who believes in you can change everything.